Let me tell you about the weirdest Christmas dinner I've ever had. I'm Sarah, and I hadn't been home for the holidays in years. You know how it is. Life gets busy and suddenly you're a stranger to your own family. But this year, I decided to make the effort. The moment I walked through the door, something felt off. Mom's hug was a bit too tight, Dad's smile a little too forced. But I brushed it off. Holiday stress, right? As we gathered around the table, I noticed an extra place setting. Are we expecting someone? I asked, trying to sound casual. That's when the doorbell rang. Mom jumped up, looking almost relieved. That must be John, she chirped. John, a name I'd never heard before. He walked in, all charm and easy smiles, claiming to be an old family friend. But here's the thing, I'd never seen this guy in my life. As we ate, John started sharing stories. Innocent at first, but then unsettling. He mentioned a family vacation from when I was 5. Remember that cabin in the woods, Sarah? The one with the creaky floorboards? I nearly choked on my turkey. How did he know about that? I'd never told anyone about that trip, not even my closest friends. Then came the story about Dad's old car. That blue Chevy was a beauty, John said, winking at Dad. Shame about the accident, though. My fork clattered to the plate. What accident? Dad had sold that car years ago, hadn't he? With each story, my parents nodded along, their eyes glazed over. It was like watching puppets on strings. I tried to interject, to question, but every time I opened my mouth, John would smoothly change the subject. The tension built like a pressure cooker. I could feel my heart racing, palms sweating. Something was very, very wrong. Suddenly, John turned to me, his eyes glinting. Sarah, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, do you remember the night you thought you saw a monster in your closet? I froze. That night? I'd never told anyone about that night. Not a soul. You screamed so loud, he continued, a smile playing on his lips. Your parents came running, but by the time they got there, the closet was empty. Just a little girl's imagination, they said. My blood ran cold. How could he possibly know this? But it wasn't your imagination, was it, Sarah? John leaned in closer. You saw something that night. Something you've been trying to forget all these years. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning. I looked at my parents, pleading silently for help, but they just sat there, smiling vacantly. That's when I noticed it. A small, almost imperceptible movement under the tablecloth. Something was crawling towards me. I jumped up, my chair clattering to the floor. What's going on? I demanded, my voice shaking. Who are you? How do you know these things? John's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed just a bit too sharp. Oh, Sarah, he said, his voice suddenly different, deeper, inhuman. I've always known. I've always been here, waiting. The lights flickered, and in that split second of darkness, I saw it. John's face. It wasn't a face anymore. It was something else. Something terrifying. I ran, out of the dining room, through the hall, fumbling with the front door. But as I yanked it open, ready to escape into the night, I froze. Outside wasn't our street. It wasn't even our town. It was a vast, empty darkness, stretching endlessly in all directions. I turned back, trembling, to find John, or whatever he was, standing right behind me. Welcome home, Sarah, he said, his voice echoing impossibly. We've been waiting for you to join us. Forever. And as I stood there, trapped between an impossible void and the thing that had been masquerading as a family friend, I realized the horrifying truth. I hadn't come home for the holidays. The holidays had come for me. You know how everyone has those special holiday traditions? Well, mine was always exploring our dusty old attic on Christmas Eve. This year, though, I wish I'd never set foot up there. It started innocently enough. I was 17, home for winter break, and feeling nostalgic. The attic was like a time capsule, full of memories and forgotten treasures. As I rummaged through old boxes, something caught my eye. A small, wrapped gift tucked away in the corner. The tag read, "To Emily, from Aunt Rose." My heart skipped a beat. Aunt Rose had passed away when I was just a baby. How had this gift gone unnoticed for so long? I carefully unwrapped it, my curiosity overriding any hesitation. Inside was an old, leather-bound journal and a tarnished silver locket. Excited by my discovery, I opened the journal, eager to learn more about the aunt I never knew. But as I started reading, my excitement quickly turned to confusion, then to horror. The journal entries started normally enough, daily musings, family anecdotes, but then they took a dark turn. Aunt Rose wrote about strange occurrences in the family, unexplained disappearances, and whispered secrets. My hands trembled as I read an entry dated just before my birth. The ritual must be completed. The firstborn daughter of each generation is the key. Emily will be the one to break the curse. Curse? Ritual? What was she talking about? Suddenly, a loud thump from downstairs made me jump, the journal falling from my hands. Heart racing, I tried to calm myself. It was probably just Mom or Dad moving around. I picked up the journal again, flipping to the last entry. The handwriting was frantic, almost illegible. They're coming for her. I can't let them take Emily. The locket is the only protection. She must never take it off. With shaking hands, I opened the locket. Inside was a small, intricate symbol I'd never seen before, and a lock of hair. My hair, I realized with a chill. Just then, I heard footsteps on the attic stairs. "Emily?" my mom called. "What are you doing up here?" I quickly hid the journal and slipped the locket around my neck. "Just looking at old stuff," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. As I turned to leave, something made me glance back at the box where I'd found the gift. That's when I saw it. A small, old photograph I hadn't noticed before. It showed a group of people in dark robes standing in a circle. In the center was a baby. With a jolt, I recognized my parents among the robed figures. And the baby was me. My mind reeled. What did all this mean? What had my family been involved in? I stumbled down the attic stairs, my head spinning. In the hallway mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself, pale, wide-eyed, the locket glinting at my throat. For a split second, I could have sworn I saw something else in the reflection. Dark figures standing behind me, their faces hidden in shadow. I whirled around, but the hallway was empty. Heart pounding, I ran to my room and locked the door. As I sat on my bed clutching the journal and locket, a terrible realization dawned on me. The family gathering tomorrow wasn't just a Christmas celebration. It was something else entirely. And I was at the center of it all. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. "The time has come, Emily. We've been waiting for you. Merry Christmas." As I stared at the message, the lights in my room flickered, and I heard a soft chanting coming from downstairs. The sound grew louder, more insistent, as footsteps approached my door. In that moment, I understood the horrifying truth. I hadn't discovered a forgotten gift. I had uncovered my own dark destiny. And as the doorknob slowly began to turn, I realized this was going to be a Christmas I'd never forget, if I survived it. Let me tell you about the Christmas that changed everything. I was struggling, bills piling up, kids expecting Santa to deliver, and me, I was drowning in debt. Our neighbors, the Johnsons, they had it all. Big house, fancy cars, and Christmas lights that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Every day, I'd watch Mr. Johnson come home, arms loaded with gifts. It was like a slap in the face. I'm not proud of what I did next, but desperation does things to a man. I decided to break in, just to grab a few gifts, maybe some cash. Nothing they'd miss, right? Wrong. So wrong. It was Christmas Eve. I waited until the lights went out, then slipped across our yards. Their security system was a joke. I mean, who leaves a window unlocked in this day and age? The house was like something out of a magazine. I crept through the living room, past a tree that must have cost a fortune. But I wasn't here for that. I headed straight for Mr. Johnson's study. That's when I heard it. A thump from the basement. My heart nearly stopped. Were they awake? I froze, listening. Nothing. Must have been the house settling, I told myself. In the study, I hit the jackpot. A safe hidden behind a painting. Classic. And wouldn't you know it, the combination was right there in the desk drawer. Some people make it too easy. Inside was cash, jewelry, and something else. A USB drive. I don't know why, but I pocketed it along with some cash. As I turned to leave, I heard it again. That thump. Louder this time. Definitely from the basement. And then, a muffled cry. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but curiosity won out. I crept towards the basement door, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it would give me away. The stairs creaked as I descended. It was pitch black down there, and the air, it smelled wrong, metallic. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and, God, I wish I hadn't. The beam illuminated a scene straight out of a nightmare. Cages. Rows of them. And inside, people. Some unconscious, others staring at me with pleading eyes. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. What the hell was this? What were the Johnsons involved in? Suddenly the basement light flicked on. I whirled around to see Mr. Johnson at the top of the stairs, a gun in his hand and a smile that chilled me to my core. "Ah, Tom," he said, as casual as if he'd caught me borrowing a cup of sugar. "Curious about our little operation, are we?" I ran. Somehow, I made it past him, out of the house and back to my own. I locked every door, every window, my hands shaking so bad I could barely manage it. What do? Call the cops? But break-ins cut both ways. I'd be arrested too. And who'd believe me without proof? The USB drive. Maybe that had something. I plugged it into my laptop, and what I saw, it was worse than I could have imagined. Names, dates, amounts. This wasn't just the Johnsons. This was big, international. A knock at the door made me jump out of my skin. Through the peephole, I saw Mr. Johnson, still smiling that terrible smile. "Tom," he called out, "let's talk about your future with our organization. After all, we're always looking for new talent." As I stood there, paralyzed with fear, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Merry Christmas, Tom. Welcome to the family." And that's when I realized the horrifying truth. I hadn't just stumbled upon a crime. I'd been recruited. The choice I made that night to steal didn't just cost me my morals. It cost me my soul. Let me tell you about the Christmas Eve that turned my quiet night alone into a living nightmare. So, I'd just gone through a nasty breakup and decided to spend the holidays by myself. You know, lick my wounds, binge some Netflix, maybe have a glass of wine or three, the usual post-breakup ritual. It was around 9 p.m. when the first call came. Unknown number. I ignored it, but then it rang again and again. On the fourth ring, I picked up, annoyed. "Hello?" I said. Silence. Then, a click as they hung up. Weird, right? But I brushed it off. Probably just some kid playing pranks on Christmas Eve. I went back to my movie, but not 10 minutes later, another call. This time, when I answered, I heard breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing. "Who is this?" I demanded. A pause, then a voice low and gravelly. "Hello, Rachel." I hung up, my heart racing. How did they know my name? The calls kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. They knew things, personal things. The caller mentioned the scar on my left knee from when I fell off my bike at 10, the name of my first pet. The recurring nightmare I'd had since childhood, but never told anyone about. With each revelation, I felt the walls closing in. How could they possibly know these things? I tried calling the police, but the line was dead. My cell? No signal. I was cut off. As midnight approached, the calls became more frequent, more intense. The voice started describing my movements. "That red sweater looks cozy, Rachel. But aren't you warm by the fire?" I froze. How could they see me? I ran through the house, checking windows, locking doors. But with each call, it became clear. Nowhere was safe. They could see everything. The final call came at 11:59 p.m. "Merry Christmas, Rachel," the voice said. "It's time for your gift. Look under the tree." My blood ran cold. I didn't have a Christmas tree. But there, in the corner of my living room, was a small pine tree that hadn't been there moments before. And under it, a perfectly wrapped gift. With shaking hands, I approached the tree. The gift tag read, "To Rachel, from your secret admirer." As the clock struck midnight, I unwrapped the gift, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. Inside was a photo album. I opened it and my world shattered. Photos of me. Hundreds of them. Spanning years. Me as a child, as a teenager, last week at the grocery store. Photos taken through windows, from across streets, in crowds. But the last photo, it was of me, right now, holding the album, a look of horror on my face. I dropped the album, spinning around, searching for the hidden camera, the intruder, anything. That's when I saw it. a face at the window, just for a second, then gone. But I recognized it was me. As I stood there, frozen in terror, my phone buzzed one last time. A text message. "Merry Christmas, Rachel. I've been watching you your whole life. It's time we finally met. Face to face." And that's when I realized the horrifying truth. The calls hadn't been coming from inside the house. They'd been coming from inside my head. As I heard footsteps approaching my front door, I understood. I wasn't alone this Christmas. I never had been. Hey there, I'm Jake. Let me tell you about the holiday getaway that turned into a nightmare. My wife Lisa and I had been going through a rough patch, so we decided to rent this secluded cabin for Christmas. You know, to reconnect and all that jazz. The place was picture perfect when we arrived. Snow-capped trees, a cozy fireplace, the works. We spent the first day hiking and taking in the scenery. It was like something out of a Hallmark movie. But on the second day, things started to get weird. It began when we tried to drive into town for supplies. The car wouldn't start. No big deal, right? These things happen. But when I popped the hood, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The battery cables had been cut clean through. Must have been an animal, Lisa said, trying to sound optimistic. But we both knew no animal could make a cut that precise. Okay, so we were stuck. But we had our phones, right? Wrong. When we tried to call for help, we found our contacts were gone. Wiped clean. And no signal, of course. That's when the panic started to set in. We were miles from anywhere, with no way to contact the outside world. As night fell, the cabin started to feel less cozy and more confining. Every creak of the floorboards, every whistle of wind through the trees set our nerves on edge. We tried to stay calm, to rationalize. Maybe it was just a series of unfortunate coincidences. But deep down, we knew better. On the third day, we decided to hike out. We packed what supplies we could and set off through the snow. But after hours of walking, something impossible happened. We ended up right back at the cabin. "This can't be," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. We walked in a straight line. We should be miles away by now. That night, as we huddled by the fire, we heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold. Footsteps in the snow, circling the cabin. Slow, deliberate steps. I grabbed the fireplace poker, the closest thing to a weapon we had, and approached the window. Through the frosted glass, I saw a figure, just standing there, watching. Suddenly, it darted away, faster than anything human should move. Lisa screamed, and I'll admit, I nearly did too. We barricaded the doors, pushed furniture against the windows, but it didn't matter, because the next sound we heard came from inside the cabin, from the attic. Thump, thump, thump. Something was up there, moving around. And then, silence. We didn't sleep that night, or the next. We took turns watching, jumping at every sound. The footsteps outside continued, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, always circling. On Christmas Eve, we found a note slipped under the door. In childlike handwriting, it read, "Are you ready to play?" That's when I lost it. I started shouting, demanding whoever was out there to show themselves. Lisa tried to calm me down, but I was beyond reason. And then, just like that, it all stopped. The footsteps, the noises, everything. An eerie calm settled over the cabin. As dawn broke on Christmas morning, we heard a car approaching. It was the property manager, looking concerned. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "We've been trying to reach you for days. There's a big storm coming. We need to evacuate the area." Relief washed over us. It was over. We were saved. But as we drove away from the cabin, Lisa turned to me, her face pale. "Jake," she whispered, "look at the back seat." I glanced in the rearview mirror and my heart stopped. There, on the seat behind us, was a small wrapped gift. The tag read, "Merry Christmas, thanks for playing." As I stared at the package, unable to breathe, I realized the horrifying truth. Our ordeal wasn't over. It was just beginning. And somewhere out there, something was waiting for us to open our gift. I've always prided myself on throwing the best New Year's Eve parties in the neighborhood. This year was going to be no different, or so I thought. The house was decked out, champagne was chilling, and the guests were starting to arrive. Everything was perfect. That is, until the doorbell rang at 10:30 p.m. I opened the door to find a man I'd never seen before. Tall, well-dressed, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hi, I'm David," he said. "I'm a friend of Sarah's. She said it'd be cool if I dropped by." Now, I didn't know any Sarah who'd be inviting friends to my party, but hey, the more the merrier, right? I welcomed him in, chalking it up to a misunderstanding. At first, David blended in seamlessly. He was charming, witty, the life of the party. But then I started noticing things. He knew people's names before they introduced themselves. He'd finish their sentences, laugh at inside jokes he couldn't possibly know. It was uncanny, almost as if he'd known these people for years. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but it clung to me like a second skin. Every time I turned around, there was David, watching me with those piercing eyes. Then came the moment that made my blood run cold. I overheard him talking to my best friend, Tom. "Remember that fishing trip last summer, Mark?" David was saying. "When you caught that monster bass and nearly fell out of the boat?" I froze. That trip had been just me and Tom. No one else knew about it. How could David possibly? As the night wore on, David's knowledge became more intimate, more unsettling. He casually mentioned my childhood pet's name, the exact date of my first kiss, even the recurring nightmare I'd never told anyone about. With each revelation, I felt the room closing in on me. My guests, once familiar faces, now seemed like strangers, their eyes slightly glazed, hanging on David's every word. I tried to confront him, to demand answers, but every time I got close, he'd smoothly slip away, leaving me grasping at thin air. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and panic started to set in. I needed to get everyone out, to end this nightmare. But as I moved to make an announcement, David beat me to it. "Friends," he said, his voice carrying an authority I couldn't understand, "it's almost time. Shall we begin the countdown?" To my horror, everyone gathered around him, ignoring me completely. As they started counting down, I noticed something terrifying. Their voices were in perfect unison, like a well-rehearsed choir. 10, 9, 8. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding. This couldn't be happening. 7, 6, 5. I tried to scream, to warn them, but no sound came out. 4, 3, 2. David turned to me, his eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light. "Happy New Year, Mark," he said, his voice echoing impossibly in the room. 1. As the clock struck midnight, the lights went out. In the pitch darkness, I heard a sound that will haunt me forever. The synchronized screams of all my guests cut off abruptly into silence. When the lights flickered back on, I was alone. The house was empty, pristine, as if the party had never happened. No glasses, no decorations, no sign of the dozens of people who had been there moments ago. And there on the mantel was a single envelope with my name on it. Inside, a note in elegant script. "Thank you for the lovely party, Mark. See you next year." As I stood there trembling, I realized the horrifying truth. I hadn't hosted a New Year's party. I had provided the feast.
Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories every week. Have you got a story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And remember, the darkness holds many secrets. Are you brave enough to uncover them? Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Sweet nightmares.